The operating room aboard the Clivran research vessel shimmered with eerie green light. Alien medical instruments, all curves and translucent filaments, hummed in intricate rhythms, projecting holographic readouts that shifted like liquid. Dr. Marin, a towering Velvani physician with 6 slender arms and eyes that glowed like twin suns, gestured toward a display that hovered in midair. His team, a collection of equally otherworldly beings, clustered around the operating table where a soldier from the Brendak coalition lay in critical condition. The Brendak soldier was massive, his body covered in thick, keratinous plates that were cracked and leaking a dark, viscous fluid. Marin adjusted the hologram scale, revealing microscopic fractures radiating through the soldier's plating like the branches of a dead tree. "We are losing him," Marin said, his melodic voice vibrating with concern. "The biomolecular fusion stabilizer cannot achieve resonance. His body rejects the calibrations." One of his assistants, a serpentine xylith with translucent skin, hissed softly. "Without stabilization, the systemic collapse will be irreversible." "That's a fancy way of saying he's dying," came a voice from the doorway. All heads turned toward the human standing just inside the threshold. Dr. Alan Harper, dressed in Earth-standard scrubs and gripping a battered medical bag, looked utterly out of place. Short and wiry, with perpetually messy hair and a face that seemed incapable of taking things too seriously. Harper was the sole human on the Clivran vessel, brought aboard for his expertise in trauma surgery. He glanced around the room, his gaze lingering on the alien instruments that filled the space. Marin's eyes narrowed. "Dr. Harper, this is not your domain. The patient's physiology is far beyond your comprehension." Harper shrugged, stepping closer. "Maybe. But I know a thing or two about fixing things when they're broken, and right now it looks like your tech isn't doing the job." Marin gestured at the display, his frustration palpable. "This injury is fractal in nature. The keratinous plating is embedded with microfilaments that regulate systemic homeostasis. If we cannot repair it at the molecular level." "Then he dies," Harper interrupted. "Got it. But all your fancy tech is just complicating things. Sometimes the simplest approach works best." The Velvani surgeon bristled, his bioluminescent skin flaring briefly. "And what primitive methods would you employ, human? Sewing him together with thread?" Harper smirked, opening his medical bag. "Pretty much." The room erupted into incredulous murmurs. Marin raised a hand to silence his team. "You are suggesting a manual repair? Crude sutures and clamps? His physiology will reject such barbaric measures." "Maybe," Harper said, pulling out a set of sterilized tools. "But I don't have the luxury of overthinking it. He's bleeding out, and you're running diagnostics." Before Marin could protest further, Harper approached the patient. The Brendak soldier's mandibles twitched weakly, and his chest heaved in labored breaths. Harper crouched beside the operating table, examining the largest fracture. Dark fluid oozed from the jagged edges of the keratin plates, pooling beneath the soldier. "First thing," Harper muttered, "we stopped the bleeding." He pulled out a stack of gauze and began packing the wound, pressing firmly to stem the flow. The Velvani team watched in stunned silence as Harper worked, his movements efficient and precise. Marin stepped closer, his glowing eyes fixed on the human's hands. "You intend to repair this without molecular fusion?" Marin asked, his tone incredulous. "Yep," Harper replied. "Just good old-fashioned manual dexterity." He reached for a suture kit, threading a curved needle with practiced ease. The Velvani murmured again, their disbelief growing. Marin leaned over the table, his bioluminescent gaze flicking between Harper and the patient. "The keratin plates are rigid," Marin said. "You cannot simply stitch them together like flesh." "I know," Harper said. "That's why I'm gonna drill." He pulled a small, portable drill from his bag, its design distinctly terrestrial. Marin recoiled. "What is that crude device?" "It's a drill," Harper said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. "I'm going to anchor the plates with stainless steel wire. Basic orthopedic trick." The Velvani surgeon looked as though he might faint. "You cannot." "Watch me," Harper said, and he began. The drill whirred softly as Harper carefully bored holes into the undamaged sections of the keratin plates, avoiding critical biofilaments. Marin's team hovered nearby, their tonal language a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. Once the holes were in place, Harper threaded the wire through, tightening it to pull the fractured plates together. Stabilization, Harper said, securing the last wire. Now we suture the soft tissue. He worked quickly, closing the gaps in the damaged areas with fine stitches, each one reinforced with adhesive strips. The bleeding slowed, and the patient's vitals began to stabilize. Harper wiped his hands on a towel, glancing at the holographic display. See? Not so barbaric after all, he said, grinning. Marin stared at him, his glowing eyes wide. Your methods are primitive yet effective. Compliments will get you everywhere, Harper said, packing his tools. Now let's get him to recovery before he decides to wake up and bite someone. Marin's bioluminescent skin shifted to a soft green, the Vulvani equivalent of cautious approval. Perhaps there is merit in simplicity. Harper slung his bag over his shoulder. Told you. Sometimes you just need a little less tech and a little more elbow grease. The Brendex soldier's massive body was carefully wheeled into the recovery chamber, a space filled with softly glowing walls and a rhythmic hum designed to encourage cellular regeneration. Doctor. Marin and his team followed closely, their elongated forms gliding effortlessly as they monitored the patient's vitals on holographic displays. Meanwhile, Dr. Alan Harper trailed behind, his medical bag swinging casually by his side. As the group reached the chamber, Harper paused to glance at the Brendeck warrior's face. The mandibles twitched slightly, and the eyes, though closed, betrayed subtle movement. Harper turned to Marin, who was adjusting a complex array of floating sensors over the patient. He's stabilizing, Harper said, but those plates won't hold forever unless you reinforce them with something better. Marin looked up from his display, his voice a mix of grudging respect and irritation. And what exactly do you suggest, Dr. Harper? Your wires and sutures are already a temporary measure. Exactly, Harper replied. Temporary. But you've got materials here I can only dream of. If you're willing to bend your rules a little, we can make those repairs permanent. Marin's glowing eyes narrowed. Bend the rules. Yeah, Harper said, leaning against the wall. You've got bioreactive alloys, right? Stuff that integrates with living tissue? Let's create some custom implants to reinforce the exoskeleton while it heals. One of Marin's assistants, the serpentine Exilith, hissed softly. Our alloys are designed for integration with molecular systems, not manual attachments. Then we adapt, Harper said. Your tech can shape the material, but it'll take a steady hand to apply it. I'll guide the process. Marin's bioluminescent skin shifted through several colors before settling into a muted indigo. You want to combine your crude methods with our advanced technology. Harper grinned. Why not? Best of both worlds. The next several hours were a whirlwind of improvisation. Harper worked alongside Marin's team in a sterile fabrication lab, surrounded by floating tools and glowing panels that responded to the Vulvani's precise gestures. The bioreactive alloy was heated in a containment chamber, its molten form shimmering with a faint iridescence. This stuff is amazing, Harper muttered, watching the alloy flow into a mold designed to match the contours of the Brendeck soldier's fractured plates. It's like liquid metal with a brain. It is a material of immense complexity, Marin said, his tone still tinged with skepticism. Your methods will need to match its precision. They will, Harper said. You handle the fancy shaping. I'll handle the attaching. When the alloy cooled and solidified, it was ready for implantation. Harper and Marin stood side by side at the patient's bedside, the Brendeck soldier still unconscious but stable. Harper adjusted his gloves and reached for the first implant, while Marin activated a holographic guide to monitor the procedure. We'll start with the largest fracture, Harper said, positioning the alloy piece over the damaged section. You keep an eye on the interface. Let me know if there's any rejection. Marin nodded, his 6 hands poised over the console. Proceed. With steady hands, Harper secured the implant, using a combination of adhesive and microfasteners that would dissolve as the alloy integrated with the keratin plates. Marin's glowing eyes tracked the process, his voice calm but firm. Integration is holding. No rejection so far. Good, Harper said, moving to the next fracture. Let's keep it that way. Piece by piece, they reinforced the exoskeleton, the bioreactive alloy bonding seamlessly with the natural material. The process was slow and painstaking, but as they worked, Harper noticed a subtle shift in Marin's demeanor. The Vilvani surgeon's skepticism gave way to focus, and by the time they finished the final repair, there was even a hint of admiration in his gaze. The structural integrity is restored, Marin said, his bioluminescent skin glowing softly, and the patient's vitals remain stable. Told you it'd work, Harper said, wiping his brow. Now all he needs is rest and some monitoring. Your fancy tech can handle that, right? Marin gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Yes, it appears that your unorthodox approach has exceeded expectations. Harper smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. The following day, Harper was back in the recovery chamber, checking on the Brendak soldier. The implants had held perfectly, and the warrior's fluid levels were normal. Harper noted the progress on a handheld device that was distinctly low-tech compared to the Vilvani's holographic tools. As he worked, the soldier stirred, his mandibles clicking softly. Harper leaned closer, his voice calm and reassuring. Hey, take it easy. You've been through a lot. The warrior opened his compound eyes, focusing on Harper with a mix of confusion and recognition. You are the healer. That's me, Harper said with a grin. Dr. Alan Harper, at your service. The soldier's voice was deep and resonant. Your methods. Strange, but they saved me. Harper shrugged. Sometimes strange works. Marin entered the room, his glowing eyes scanning the patient's vitals. He is recovering well. Your repairs have proven effective. Glad to hear it, Harper said. But don't think this means I'm retiring. You'll still need me when your tech decides to throw another tantrum. Marin's bioluminescent skin shifted to a faint green, the Vilvani equivalent of amusement. Perhaps there is merit in collaboration, Dr. Harper. Harper chuckled, packing his bag. Told you. Sometimes simple tools can do amazing things. Days after the successful procedure, the Cliveran research vessel was abuzz with activity. Word of Dr. Alan Harper's unconventional methods had spread through the crew, sparking a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and outright disbelief. Harper, however, had little interest in the gossip. He was more concerned with the growing queue of patients that seemed to find their way to him. First, it was a minor injury, a LARAC engineer with a nasty laceration caused by a misaligned plasma conduit. The alien's bright teal blood had pooled around its segmented arms as Harper worked quickly with sutures and antiseptic, marveling at how different their physiology was from a human's. Then came a Sholvan cartographer whose bioluminescent organs were disrupted by a freak exposure to ultraviolet radiation. Harper's solution was deceptively simple, a makeshift filter crafted from reflective foil and adhesive strips to block harmful rays until the tissue could regenerate. Every time Harper resolved one of these cases, the Vilvani medical team watched with a mix of amazement and thinly veiled irritation. Dr. Marin, in particular, oscillated between grudging admiration and exasperation, especially as Harper's reputation grew. The turning point came during a high-stakes emergency. An alarm blared through the vessel, echoing down the crystalline halls with a pulsing urgency. Harper was in the mess hall, halfway through a surprisingly decent cup of coffee, when a young Vilvani medic sprinted in, her skin glowing an anxious orange. Dr. Harper, she said, her melodic voice trembling. We need you in the trauma bay, now. Harper put his mug down, already on his feet. What happened? Mining vessel collision, she said breathlessly. 2 survivors, but their injuries are severe. The auto surgeons cannot handle the damage. Harper grabbed his medical bag and followed her at a brisk pace. When he arrived at the trauma bay, the scene was chaotic. One patient, a Nithrin miner, had a collapsed lung and deep puncture wounds from jagged metal debris. The other, a Cliveran technician, had a severed arm and extensive burns across his torso. The Vilvani medics were clustered around their tools, struggling to calibrate a bio-suturing system that seemed to be misfiring. Murrin stood at the center, his luminous eyes scanning diagnostic projections with increasing frustration. "We cannot synchronize the cellular regenerator," Murrin said, his voice sharp. "The wounds are too complex. The systems are failing." Harper stepped in, his bag slung over his shoulder. "Let me guess. Fancy tech isn't cooperating." Murrin shot him a withering look. "This is not the time for sarcasm, Dr. Harper." "No, it's the time to fix these people before they die," Harper said, moving toward the Nithrin miner. He crouched by the patient, assessing the injuries quickly. The collapsed lung took priority. He pulled out a scalpel, a chest tube, and a small hand pump. "What are you doing?" Murrin demanded, watching as Harper sterilized the scalpel. "Our systems are useless right now," Harper interrupted. "This is a basic thoracostomy. It'll relieve the pressure so he can breathe. Unless you've got a magic wand, let me do my job." Murrin hesitated but stepped aside. Harper made a small incision in the miner's side, sliding the tube into place. Dark fluid drained out as the hand pump hissed, and the miner's breathing evened out almost immediately. Harper secured the tube with adhesive tape before turning to the Cliveran technician. "Okay," Harper said. "What's his status?" The technician's arm was beyond saving. Harper grimaced at the burns that crisscrossed his chest and shoulder. The Vilvani medics had applied a gel-like substance to the wounds, but it wasn't enough. "We need to amputate the arm," Harper said, pulling out a bone saw and clamps. Murrin's skin flared indigo. "You cannot be serious. Our tissue printers can reconstruct his arm if he survives the next 30 minutes, sure," Harper snapped. "But he's bleeding out. We need to stop that now." Without waiting for permission, Harper began the amputation. The Vilvani medic stared in stunned silence as he worked, cutting through tissue and bone with practiced efficiency. He cauterized the wound with a handheld device, then dressed it with layers of gauze and an improvised compression sleeve. "Burns next," Harper muttered. "Get me whatever you use for tissue regeneration. If it's compatible, I'll apply it manually." One of the assistants handed him a container of shimmering gel, which Harper spread carefully over the technician's burns. The alien writhed slightly but remained stable. Harper stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "Both are stable for now," he said, looking at Murrin. "Your tech can take over if it decides to cooperate." Murrin approached the Cliveran technician, his luminous eyes scanning the patient. "The vitals are improving," he admitted reluctantly. "Your interventions were effective." Harper smirked, packing his tools. "That's becoming a trend, huh?" In the days that followed, the patients made remarkable recoveries, aided by the Vilvani's advanced regenerative systems. Harper's role in their survival was undeniable, and while some of the medical team remained skeptical, Murrin seemed to have softened. "You continue to surprise us," Dr. Harper Murrin said one evening as they reviewed the miner's progress. "Glad I could help," Harper replied. "But your tech deserves credit too. It's incredible when it works." Murrin's skin shifted to a pale green, a rare show of amusement. Perhaps there is wisdom in combining methodologies. Harper raised his coffee mug in a mock toast. "Here's to old-school ingenuity and new-school brilliance." For the first time, Murrin smiled. A few weeks after the mining vessel emergency, Dr. Alan Harper found himself in the Cliveran research vessel's main conference chamber. The room was filled with representatives from various species, each one more bizarre and fascinating than the last. Luminescent Vilvani, shimmering Xylith, crystalline Torvix, and even a hulking Brendek warrior stood among the group. The Brendek soldier, now fully recovered and looming like a mobile fortress, gave Harper an appreciative nod. At the front of the chamber, Dr. Murrin was addressing the assembly, his bioluminescent skin glowing with subdued tones of professionalism. Floating holograms displayed detailed schematics of alien physiology alongside images of Harper's interventions. "Our vessel has been at the forefront of advanced medical science for decades," Murrin began, his melodic voice carrying across the room. "Yet in recent weeks, we have witnessed the efficacy of unconventional methods grounded in simplicity and ingenuity." Murrin gestured toward Harper, who stood with his arms crossed, looking slightly uncomfortable. Dr. Harper's contributions have demonstrated that adaptability and practical problem solving can bridge gaps in even the most complex scenarios. Harper raised an eyebrow. You're saying I wing it and hope for the best. The room rippled with amused murmurs. Marin's glow shifted faintly green as he replied, I prefer to frame it as an intuitive application of knowledge. Well, if that's your way of saying good job, I'll take it, Harper said with a smirk. The assembly broke into a mix of applause and alien tonal equivalents, their collective acknowledgement resonating through the chamber. But the moment was interrupted by a sharp alert, a piercing chime that filled the air. Everyone froze as holographic displays blinked to life, showing a small shuttle spinning out of control. It's a medical transport, Marin said, his tone suddenly serious, carrying an injured delegation from the Vrent Alliance. They're requesting an emergency docking. Harper's bag was already slung over his shoulder. Guess the congratulations will have to wait. Let's move. In the docking bay, the shuttle landed hard, its thrusters sputtering. As the doors slid open, a team of medics rushed forward to assist the injured. Harper was among them, his eyes scanning the scene. The Vrent delegation consisted of 3 individual slim, ethereal beings with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their injuries were severe deep lacerations, fractures, and signs of internal trauma. Marin's team immediately deployed their scanners, filling the air with holographic projections and streams of data. Harper knelt beside the closest patient, a young Vrent with a mangled arm and what appeared to be a collapsed airway. He checked the vitals, his brow furrowing. This one's airway is blocked, Harper called out. I need an intubation kit. Marin gestured toward a floating device. Our automated airway stabilizer. Too slow, Harper interrupted, pulling a tube from his bag. I'll do it manually. He worked quickly, inserting the tube with practiced efficiency. The patient's breathing stabilized, and Harper turned to the next case. This one had a compound fracture in their leg, the bone protruding through a translucent layer of skin. We'll need to immobilize this, Harper said, glancing at Marin. What do you have for bone stabilization? A polymer cast, Marin replied. But it requires molecular alignment too. Harper shook his head. Then we're splinting it the old-fashioned way. Hand me those support rods. One by one, Harper addressed the injuries, improvising when the advanced tools failed or needed recalibration. He used clamps, adhesive strips, and even a makeshift sling to stabilize the patients, all while Marin and his team assisted, visibly impressed by Harper's decisiveness. By the time they reached the 3rd patient, a Vrent diplomat with severe internal bleeding, Marin took the lead, using a biosuturing system that Harper had grudgingly come to respect. Together they worked seamlessly, blending traditional and advanced techniques to stabilize the diplomat. After hours of grueling effort, the Vrent delegation was stabilized and transferred to recovery chambers. Harper slumped into a chair in the corner of the medical bay, rubbing his eyes. Marin approached, his bioluminescent skin glowing a soft green. You continue to surprise me, Dr. Harper, Marin said, his tone calm. Your methods, though unconventional, have become an invaluable asset. Harper smirked, leaning back in his chair. You sound like you're warming up to me. I am, Marin admitted. Your practicality complements our technology. Together we have achieved results neither could accomplish alone. Harper nodded, the weight of the day's events settling over him. I guess we make a pretty good team. Marin extended one of his slender hands, a gesture of camaraderie. Harper shook it, feeling a sense of mutual respect that had grown through their shared experiences. As the medical bay quieted and the ship returned to its routine, Harper looked around, taking in the blend of alien technology and human ingenuity that had come to define his time aboard the vessel. He couldn't help but smile. Maybe simplicity isn't so simple after all, he said to himself, already thinking about what challenges might come next.